Hamas has announced that it is suspending the next round of hostage release in the Gaza Strip, citing a series of cases where the group claims Israel has violated the deal between the sides. How many hostages are supposed to be released in the current phase of the deal? How has each side violated the agreement, and where do things stand? I'm Alon Burstein. Let's dive in. On Monday, February 10th, the spokesperson of Hamas's Al-Qassam brigades, Abu Obaida, stated that the organization is suspending the next release of Israeli hostages in the Gaza Strip until further notice. He listed a series of grievances and accusations against Israel, stating that violations of the deal have included, and I quote, delaying the return of displaced persons to northern Gaza, targeting them with shelling and gunfire in various areas of the Gaza Strip, and failing to allow the entry of relief materials in all forms as agreed upon, end quote. He also added that the suspension will remain in effect until Israel complies with its past obligations and also adds compensation retroactively for its violations, and added that Hamas has thus far lived up to its obligations and remains committed to the deal as long as Israel lives up to its side. So in terms of where things stand in the hostage deal right now, Hamas's announcement comes on day 22 out of the 42 days of the first phase of the hostage deal. With regards to the hostages, out of the 33 hostages of the first phase of the deal, 16 of them have been released thus far. 17 more are expected to be released in the remaining weeks. Of those 17, it is estimated that 9 are alive and around 8 are dead. Their bodies will be returned. This is also part of the agreement. Israel, in turn, has released 766 Palestinian prisoners from Israeli prisons, including over 150 of them that are considered quote-unquote heavy prisoners that are serving life sentences in Israeli jails. Other facets of this phase of the deal have been a truce in the Gaza Strip and limitations on the way the IDF, the Israeli military, is allowed to use Gaza's airspace. There's also been substantial increases in the amount of humanitarian aid that comes into Gaza. The Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt has been opened in order to evacuate injured Palestinians, including a certain amount of injured militants whose IDs are approved by Israel and Egypt, and a major IDF redeployment in the Gaza Strip. Chief among them has been a staged withdrawal of the IDF from the Netzarim corridor, thereby allowing internally displaced Palestinians to return to northern Gaza for the first time since the war began. When it comes to violations of the agreement, the violations between the sides thus far can, I would say, broadly be divided into two categories. These are violations of the development of the first phase of the deal and violations relating to the next phases of the deal. With regards to the ongoing development of the first phase, despite Hamas's accusation, Hamas is in fact the one that is largely responsible for more violations and has commonly been the one who has quote-unquote been the instigator of violations. In this category, Israel has very often responded each time with violations of its own. Hamas's violations have included repeated delays and missing deadlines in submitting the list of hostages that are going to be released, changing the order of the released hostages, and also attempting to renegotiate ad hoc over Arbel Yahud's release, trying to change the amount of Palestinian prisoners that will be released in exchange for her, and delays in confirming the total amount of live hostages that will be released in this round. Israel has responded each time with its own quote-unquote counter-violations of the agreement. Chief among them have been delays in evacuating the IDF from the Ar-Rashid road, allowing Palestinians to return to northern Gaza, and conditioning the continuation of the deal by demanding an unscheduled hostage release, which in fact did happen on January 30th. With regards to the second category of violations relating to the second phase of the deal, thus far, Israel has been the one who has been both threatening violations and doing them in practice. According to the terms of the agreement, on day 16 of the current phase of the agreement, on phase 1, Israel and Hamas were supposed to begin negotiations on implementing phase 2 of the agreement that relates to the complete IDF withdrawal from the Gaza Strip, the release of all remaining hostages in exchange for a substantial amount of Palestinian prisoners. Israel, however, missed this deadline and only sent a delegation to the negotiations on day 20. Even then, that delegation was forbidden from negotiating anything to do with the next phase of the agreement. Instead, it was limited by the Israeli government to only discuss further implementation of phase 1. In addition to that, the Israeli government has repeatedly stated that it intends to violate the last stages of phase 1 and the beginning of phase 2, specifically stating that despite the country's obligation to begin withdrawing from the Philadelphia Axis, that is the border between Gaza and Egypt, on day 42, the country has no intention of doing so. In addition to that, Israel's public endorsement of U.S. President Trump's stated plans for a complete population transfer of Palestinians out of the Gaza Strip is unto itself seen as a major violation of phases 2 and 3 of the deal, and the repeated statements that this will only take place after Israel finishes fighting and hands Gaza over to the United States somehow is also being framed by Hamas as a full admission by Israel that it intends to violate the agreement that is supposed to continue towards a phased ceasefire and idea of withdrawal from the Gaza Strip. Hamas has also stated that the guarantees that the United States have given that Israel will uphold its end of the deal and the ceasefire are no longer seen as valid, seeing as the United States is now a party stating that it supports violating the next phases of the deal. Looking at Hamas's suspension of the next round of hostage release, however, I will say in a moment of analysis that at the current moment it does not look like Hamas is intending to walk away from the agreement. It is more likely using this as a negotiating tactic. One of the things that lead to this conclusion is the timing of the announcements appears to have been very, very carefully chosen. This was not just Hamas responding to a violation, but it was a specific strategic choice at this moment. This announcement happened a day after the IDF has fully evacuated from the Netzarim corridor, thereby removing possibly the biggest leverage that Israel has to forestall the agreement on its end. It also happened 2 days after the release of hostages that have been severely mistreated while they were in captivity, which is leading to far more pressure on Israel's government to complete the deal from within the Israeli population. In addition to that, the fact that Hamas announced the suspension of hostage release on Monday, when the next round of release is supposed to happen on Saturday, is also indicative that Hamas wants the negotiating parties to use these days to apply pressure on Israel. If Hamas actually wanted to walk away from the deal, it would likely announce that on Friday and gain those extra days of humanitarian aid coming in, rather than announcing it on Monday, leaving a lot of room for negotiations. In addition to this issue of timing, the various things that Hamas cited as reasons for the suspension unto themselves are indicative that Hamas is not actually planning to, quote-unquote, break the bank with this. As an example, one of the things that Hamas cites are delays in humanitarian aid coming into the Gaza Strip. Up until now, the amount of trucks that have come into the Gaza Strip has largely lived up to what Israel was supposed to live up to. What Hamas may be referencing is delays in the entrance of 60,000 mobile home units that were supposed to enter into the Gaza Strip, and they have been delayed for additional security checks. However, if you look at the deal very closely, the deal does not actually say what date those mobile housing units are supposed to come into the Gaza Strip. It only says that they will come in during phase 1. Therefore, Hamas knows this. It is likely using this as a negotiating tactic to push Israel, rather than actually planning to walk away, because these things are not major violations of the actual agreement. Hamas is very likely hoping that this suspension will pressure the negotiating countries to apply pressure on Israel to begin serious talks about Phase 2. Phase 2 is the critical one for the organization that leads it towards a future in the Gaza Strip. Despite this, I will also say that even though this may be muscle flexing on Hamas's part, it is nonetheless being taken very seriously within Israel. The IDF has ordered its units to be ready in the Southern Command for a possible collapse of the truce. Israel's Minister of Defense has also said that he's preparing the IDF in order to possibly return to fighting if the situation does break down. I'm only saying this because it is possible that even if Hamas has not intended to quote-unquote break the bank with its current move, the situation could spiral out of control as a result of the Israeli response, and obviously remains to be seen in the coming days how Israel will respond, what exactly will happen. Moments before I recorded this, it was reported that U.S. President Trump said that if all the hostages do not return by Saturday, then all hell should break loose and the ceasefire should be canceled. At this point, only 3 hostages are supposed to be released on Saturday, so the situation is very volatile. Obviously, it remains to be seen. That is my highlight on the latest events on the Israel-Hamas War and Hamas's suspension of the next round of hostage release. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to send them on to anyone who you think might be interested in them. Hit that like button and subscribe if you want to know when they come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and an Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.